So, Stephen D here on Pure 24/7 Radio, and we are joined by our good friends from Rural Missions. Hello, Bob.
Good morning, Stephen.
Pleasure to have you on to chat about Rural Missions and what you get up to. But we also have with us Becky. Hello, Becky.
Hiya, Stephen. Nice to meet you.
It's great to have you on. If you start, by the way, Bob, by just giving us a brief overview of why we do these conversations, what Rural Missions is all about.
Yeah, of course. So, Rural Missions, we are a charity working across the UK, and our sole aim is to help churches in rural communities to engage its community and to help people find and follow Jesus where they are.
Cool. And so we're here to chat a bit about that today. Where did you want to take the conversation today?
So, the last couple of conversations we've had, I brought one of our team, Steffi, and so I thought it'd be great to bring Becky over, who has a whole wealth of wisdom and experience, specifically in the world of children, young people, and families. So I thought it'd be great to look at why are they so important to our communities, to our churches, and to the world as a whole. Just a small topic today.
Absolutely. So what is your role then, Becky?
Hiya, I am a Children, Youth and Families Mission Lead for Rural Missions. So I head up the work that we do in supporting churches to engage with children, young people and families in their community.
Cool. And so what does a daily job look like for you then? What's a day-to-day stuff?
Oh, no 2 days are ever the same. It's a real mixture of things. I'm often doing anything from meeting with ministry friends across the country online and having a chat about what they're up to and how we can connect and engage with them, all the way through to helping support a church in running their children's and youth work. Maybe recently I was sat at a messy church helping at the planting table. So my role can be incredibly varied. More of my time is spent thinking strategically around what does it look like to engage children, youth and families in our community in rural settings. How do we help them to encounter Jesus and to develop their own faith journey? But I do love it when I get to actually work with children and work young people. That's my first love.
Excellent. Well, perfectly in the right job then. So what might be some of the differences for engaging with children and families or helping to churches to engage with families as opposed to some of the other stuff we talked about there, Bob?
Yeah, so it is an important aspect because I think rural communities we do feel are a little bit underloved and underrepresented, and we've spoke about that at length over the last this will be 10 weeks now. And one of the aspects that people also don't realize is that children and young people are still in our villages. I think we've become so accustomed to urbanization and what that means. So many of our churches that we talk to come to us and say, we know we have them around us, but we just don't know where to start. So that's where Becky and Rebecca, that are the resources cupboard, which is our CYF department here at Rural Missions, where they come in and really help to unpack what it means to engage, starting from some of the simplistic things as well. So Becky, I know it's not my interview, and I brought you in, so I'm going to ask you a question. Why is it important that we should engage with children and young people?
Oh, big question there. We get given answers to this question a lot rather than being asked this question. So we get a lot of churches telling us that they need to engage children and young people because they need to keep their building going, they need the church to carry on in the future, that it's not going to be here if we're not involved. And I always backtrack completely from that and say, look, let's ask the question again. Why is it so important that we do this work? And the reason why is because it's our God-given mandate to tell the next generation. So it's really clear, Deuteronomy 6:7, tell the next generation, pass these stories on. And of course, we're in a society right now where, I mean, that's a task that's given primarily to a family to pass it on to your family. We're in a society where most families don't have that story to pass on, the God story. And so we're connecting with whole families and helping them to encounter Jesus for the first time. And if children and young people are not in our churches, then we're missing out. They're an important part of the body of Christ. and anybody who's missing from that, we're missing out on them being part of that, and they're missing out from a relationship with Jesus.
Yeah, I think there's something we've spoken about before on this is how children aren't just they're not tomorrow's church. They can be part of today's church, and I think that's a big, really important aspect of what you're talking about there, about how they can be very much a part of the church now. So when we're talking about these rural settings, and they can actually reach out to the community, that's not just the older folk. That's everyone, including the younger people. So yeah, it's really really important to remember they're actually part of today's church if we let them.
Yeah, absolutely. And they're teaching us as well. I mean, I've recently become a Sunday school teacher, and I love it. And there's always this anxiety when somebody's out doing Sunday school, that they might be missing out on the teaching. Well, I learn far more from the children that I'm working with around that story than I might learn maybe saying a sermon. Maybe I shouldn't say that. Maybe I'm learning as much as, but my sense is that they're teaching us and we're teaching them and we're learning together. And so if they're not in our churches, we're missing seeing something of who God is as well. They bear the image of Christ. And they, Jesus says you've got to become like a child. So what does that actually mean? Well, we've got to have them in our midst. We've got to discover what that means and learn together.
Yeah. So in rural settings, we talk a lot about the unique challenges that are faced. Are there any differences when it comes to trying to get involved with children and families in a rural setting as opposed to an urban setting? What might be some of the unique challenges for a rural community? Because I think there are a lot of rural settings where there might be more older folk, but as we've pointed out, there's plenty of younger children and families and youth within those communities. So what might be some of the unique challenges that a rural setting would face when trying to reach out to the younger people?
Yeah, I think the first thing is that no two rural communities are the same. So we're working with a group of churches, and one village versus the neighbouring village will have a very different identity. So I can't answer for the rural church, as a whole. It's very, very different. My sense from some of the conversations I've had recently is actually what we're seeing in the rural church. We've been ahead of some of the challenges that urban churches are facing, in that we've been used to not having many volunteers, not having a lot of children there on a Sunday, and these things might be newer challenges for some bigger churches. So for us, it looks like responding differently to the needs and the opportunities that exist with the gifts that we have available to us. So it might be really hard to run a traditional weekly outreach club, but there are things we can do with what we've got in that church that can enable them to meet children and young people there. For instance, it might be really hard to find a volunteer team, a good sized team. So you've got all your safety recruited team, you've got all your DBS in check, you've got all your risk assessments. Actually, you just cannot get enough people to do that. Okay, what does it look like to do things with whole families, so that there's less of a burden on our team to be holding everything, but that families come together? Actually, that in itself is an absolute gift, because we can explore faith with parents and children together. What does it look like to do things less regularly? So we can't manage every week. We might be able to manage fortnightly or monthly. We can do that. What might it look like to do things with somebody else? We've got groups that are developing because the parish councils have come to the church and said, can we work together on a thing? We've got some funding. We want some youth provision. What does that look like we know that you guys you've got volunteers. We might not have hundreds, and you've got some skill, you've got some interest in this. What can you bring to that? So yeah, I think that's some of the specific challenges that we face in rural. There are then some that are really, really specific, like churches that say, well, we can't do it here because we don't have a toilet. And so you have to think very, very differently about what it looks like to do work in those settings.
Do you know, one of the things I've absolutely loved from these conversations that we've been having over the last 10 weeks now is how there'll be a problem that will come up, and the solution that then comes to solve that problem is often quite simple. So as you're talking about lack of volunteers, lack of people able to provide what they want to provide, simple solution, you bring the whole family together, and then that problem's kind of solved. And then you kind of think, well, how sustainable is it? What can actually be done? And I really love hearing some of the really simple solutions to some of the problems that might be faced in trying to reach out into local communities. And in today's conversation around reaching out to the children, youth, and families in any local settings. So it's really cool to hear those stories of problems coming up and then simple solutions being provided. It's great. Yeah.
I wonder if we've got some more stories, Becky, because one of the things that Becky and Rebecca have been doing for the last couple of years is working with a deanery down in Bedfordshire and just helping 30 churches to explore children, youth and families ministry. Why don't you tell us a bit about that, Becky? Because I think there's some real encouragement there.
Yeah, there are, and I think what's been really great is from the work that we've been doing is bringing a atmosphere of let's try things. Some of this is going to work, and some of it's not, and some of it's going to work for a season, and then we'll need to revisit it. So being constantly learning as you go, I think, is really, really important. Some of the really exciting projects that have come out of that work have been one has been around the transition of children from year 6 into year 7. So what churches have always done really well is to get the year 6s together, give them a little book, maybe a holding cross, maybe a Bible, maybe like a scripture union moving up book. We do that really well. But what we tend to do is say, so long, goodbye, farewell, we wish you all the best. And what this group have been doing is looking at how do we bridge that gap into year 7. So they've created this thing that's called Fire Pit Friends. And so once a month, the year 7s come back to the church around a fire pit with meeting with the year 6s from primary school, meeting with a couple of their teachers and the vicar, and just gathering together and saying, how's it going? What challenges are you facing? What might God have to say into this? It's such a new and creative form of youth ministry that you won't see in the books, but it's brilliant. Another thing that's worked really, really well has been around equipping grandparents. So we've got churches where there are no children and there are nobody parent age, but there are grandparents and great grandparents, and they've got a real heart and a passion for praying for their grandchildren. And so in one church, this work's developed, and they started with an open church event last summer where they had a whole range of activities, opened the doors, really lovely cake and coffee, and welcomed everybody in to play games and do crafts and have a tour of the church. Lovely. But then out of that, there's been a continuation. So in the October half term, a couple of the grandparents who were involved in the church got their grandchildren together in church and had a painting afternoon. And they just created all this artwork, and then they put it up and they had an art exhibition just for people in the community to come and have a look and see what the children have produced. And it's just for the children, it's been, this church is a safe place for me, that they value me. I have something to contribute here. My grandparents care so much about me that they've invested this time and effort and energy in this place that's clearly special to them, the church. And so we're just looking forward to seeing how that develops as a different form of doing ministry. That's been exciting. And there's been stories across we've tried different things. We've tried Wild Church. That was for a season, not forever. We've had another group of young people where the leaders of the churches said to them, we want you to run a youth service. And this group of teenagers turned around and said, we'll lead youth-led worship. It's going to be for everybody. We don't want it to just be for the teenagers. We want all ages there. And so they were having these once a month youth-led services where they would shape the teaching and the worship and the prayer, and seeing them grow in their ministry. And that was beautiful.
That's really cool. That reminds me of what you were saying earlier about how it was the children. You learned so much from the children that you're working with, and how actually, like what we were saying about how actually children are very much part of today's church if we let them be. They're not tomorrow's church, but part of today's church. And as we've been exploring how rural settings, churches in rural settings might reach out into their local community, it's really cool to see, to hear about these positive stories of people being able to do exactly that, reaching out into their community, and to hear youth wanting to lead worship and to lead that time together. That's really, really cool to hear.
Yeah. And I think it is important to remember that they're all part of the same bigger family, aren't they? It's one community, and especially in the rural settings, people do come together more so than within the urbanized setting. And so you do get that much more cohesive approach to how we bring people up. And I know previously in our conversation, Stephen, I've talked about the hot chocolate stop And the fact that there are now several churches and
Mm.
it's quickly starting to multiply, something as simple as having hot chocolate outside your church as school
Yeah.
children go past with the right safeguarding in place. Don't just rock up and hope you can give kids hot chocolate, or even ice creams on the sunnier days. And that bears fruit because young people, children, they're the same as us. They just want someone to be there for them. They want to feel valued and appreciated. That they don't want to feel overlooked. They just want someone to care.
Mm.
And I think the church, if you can't find care there, then we should just shut the doors and give up. But the reality is the church is a caring institution and we love people because God first loved us. So for me, that's why we need to crack on and do some work with children and young people because it's important to. God loves them, we love them.
Yeah. I'm curious to know if there's something of a challenge trying to get churches to engage with the youth and families. If there's any unique challenges you come across, Becky, where perhaps churches are less willing to step out and help in that particular field.
Yeah, I think there can be. Sometimes there's some fear. Um, Bob's mentioned safeguarding, which is so important. It's vital that what we do is safe. Um, but because it's misunderstood in churches, it often means that people are fearful of doing it because they might get the rules wrong, and we don't want to do
Ah,
that. So actually, we need to be equipping churches. We need to be encouraging them to access the right training, to see that this is all perfectly sensible and right and appropriate. Um, that can be a big barrier. It's never about not wanting to do it. It's more about obstacles in the way. So for some, it is actually we want to be involved in this, but we don't want to be the ones leading it. We don't have this expertise. We don't have the specialism. Uh, Young people can feel a bit scary if we've not worked with them for a while. So actually just breaking that down, doing a little bit of hand holding, helping people across that bridge really, and forming those relationships that are so important. When we work with a church, we'll often say, do you have a toddler group? Well, we get asked all the time, we want to start a youth group. So we'll say, do you have a toddler group? And that's not maybe just being awkward. It's actually saying if we start with children from the very early days, we have the opportunity to speak into their lives long term, to form relationships long term, and to build something together with them. Uh, it's much harder going downstream and pulling people out of the lake than out of the river than it is to go upstream and prevent them falling in the first place. So let's walk with families from day one, and actually toddler groups are so much less scary than starting a youth group, I think. So yeah, there's always a different way to approach it.
yeah. That's really interesting how people might be so put off by the fear of safeguarding and stuff like that, trying to get it right. It shows a heart of want to do it right and can understand that fear definitely. So walking alongside them and showing them it can be done. There are, ways to fill out the forms. It obviously I can appreciate why people would be put off by that. It is a huge challenge, but at the same time it can be overcome. And simply to be afraid of a few forms is not a reason to stop at the end of the day.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think just speaking into that as well, I think it's also recognizing that children, young people want a voice into what is happening.
Yeah.
And sometimes we can put stuff on because we think it's right to put it on,
Yeah.
but actually we do need to approach them and figure out what's going to be the best space for them. I remember speaking to a church once that they decided they were going to do a toddler group, and that was good. They'd engaged the community, they'd spoke about it, but they'd not included them in how do we do this. So I think it was you, Becky, that even told me the story that they set everything up, they'd got new toys, everything was great. They opened the doors for their first toddler morning and realized that no one can get in because they've only got steps up to the church. And so, where on earth are we going to put buggies? How are people going to get in here with children? And so it needed a bit of a rethink. And their heart was in the right place, but actually they'd not really thought and considered, let's bring someone else in to help shape this. Let's talk to those that this will be for and let them help to shape it. That could be a winner.
Yeah, I think there's
Interesting.
two parts to that as well. I think there's a big thing at the moment about the fact that so Generation Alpha, those who are children right now, they want to be players in the game. They don't want things to be done to them. They want or for them. They want to be part of the solution. So for all us setting up these incredible programs or events that we think are amazing, they're not interested if they're not engaged in it. So I think that's really important that we actually listen to the voice of children and young people. And the second thing around that is around relationship. We've talked about relationships a lot today. Building relationships means that we value the person in front of us. We value who they are and what they bring into the party, not just we've got the answer for you. And it's Jesus. I'm being a bit silly. We know the gift that Jesus has for us. But actually, let's listen to what people are really asking and what their heart and what their questions are.
Yeah, I think we've talked a little bit about that before, actually, that the need to sort of see what the community needs. I think Bob mentioned someone setting something up that wasn't actually needed in that local area. And actually, if they tried something else, that was what was more needed. So asking and building up those relationships with the community. But it's really interesting to then consider how you then go about with the final result and how you might include everyone in it. And when we look at children and families and youth, I think it can be very easily decided, oh, that's something we do very different. Actually, all the same principles can be applied. A little bit different, a little bit more technical stuff when it comes to safeguarding, but all the basic stuff that we've talked about over the last few weeks still very much apply to this, just a little bit different, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely. Listening to them, working with them, figuring it out along the way, and not thinking that we've got to replicate this thing that someone else is doing and that's the right answer. What is going to work in our context? So I've talked a lot about toddler groups, but I know that in my local church we couldn't get a toddler group going, but we could get a warm space that ran after school run and had quite a few toddlers there. So that was really interesting. Actually, it might not be you can't have a cookie cutter approach to ministry. You've got to understand your context and what's going to work there and what's going to be appropriate.
Yeah, which leads me perfectly, Becky, to say that anyone who's listening and you're thinking, where do I start? Like, what are the needs in my community? I could do with someone just to talk through, to offer some advice, some resources, maybe some training. Then I always like to end with it, Stephen. You can head to ruralmissions.org.uk because we would value and really love to be able to journey with people on this. So whether you're already established or just thinking, how do I get started, then do get in touch with us. We'd love to offer some free support and resource into how you engage children, young people and families in your community.
Excellent. Thank you so much for joining us, Becky and Bob Goody. It's been a pleasure to chat and to really discuss this area of children, families and youth. So as Bob said, the address is ruralmissions.org.uk.
Perfect.
Thank you for coming.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Here at Pure 247 Radio, we've had the privilege of speaking to some amazing people with some amazing stories.
I was about 5k off the coast paddling, and I was watching this storm on the land, and it literally hit a mountain, and rather than just going over the top of it, just turned and just came straight at me. You can't stay on the board in that instance, so I literally am jumping off the back of the board. I've got everything tethered down on the board, and I'm just holding on to the back of the board.
As I walked in, there was a fight going on the floor. There was a police sergeant sailing over the desk to help with restraining somebody. And the doors were clanging shut, all the big metal gates, and there were alarms going off and radios. And I felt this most enormous peace come over me because I realised that this is where God wanted me to spend my career behind bars.
It was like a baptism of fire, and it was like the most socially deprived council wards in Britain. And then we were going into schools, and then kids were coming to the gigs, but then knocking on my door at night, and I was out there playing football to 11:30 p.m. at night, 12 o'clock, feeding kids, running youth clubs.
If you've missed an inspiring conversation and want to catch up, or you'd like to revisit a brilliant interview, you can. Our interviews are available on YouTube and podcast, so you can always catch up anytime you like. Search for Pure 247 Radio wherever you get your podcasts, or find our YouTube channel at Pure 247 Radio, or head over to www.pure247radio.org/catch up.